All 23 of them, 20 students and 3 teachers, had just now got acquainted with the Banshee's monstrous visit. Immersed in it, they saw firsthand the brutal force and consequent havoc it could wreak on a ship with canvas sails. It was fortuitous to have seen the high crashing waves, to experience their reckless power against deck, against aloft rigging, and to feel the wind's ferocious sharp whip, because for many hours to come they would be experiencing it with no such visuals, with no such direct contact. Blind to the aggressor, they would be left to feel its effects, albeit in a dry but tumultuous oasis in the ship's hold. And this could be even more terrifying. Unbridled winds blew in convoluted streams straight onto the bark's prow. For moments they hit to the port, then switched to shove her from starboard. Such a powerful storm evoked the image of a tortured entity erupting from the ocean's depths, wired with a heinous rage at the audacity of the vessel's presence, and rejecting it outright. Gusts hit brutally, like a hard fist, and sent Solaris's hull to jump at angles, this way and that. Her bow dove fast into gullies, only to be wrenched up again on seething tons of moving liquid, on sweeping walls of green glass water. Hour after hour it went on, without giving hint of a lull, which left the cooks, Jasper and Malvina, to make a tough decision. Despite guardrails, each time the ship took a blow, the pots bounced off the stove. The 2 had to scramble to clamp down the galley completely, save for several jugs of water and boxes of crackers that Malvina, wearing her signature headband, delivered to the passageway. "Thanks, Malvina," several teens responded. Although she was strong, she was short and had taken the nickname in stride. Most of all, her sense of humor was just the thing needed to soften the rough edges of her counterpart. Jasper, with the burn marks on his forearms, was abrupt and not given to mollycoddling anyone. Nonetheless, they worked well as a team, despite a difference of a decade and a half in age. At times such as this, all plans get shoved aside. Captain Morgan had said as much in the Halifax classroom. Survival is our only focus. Every effort, all muscle power and wits are aimed at keeping the ship upright, minimizing damage to standing gear, and maintaining a dry below deck. Therefore, in the midst of this frightful onslaught, the first scheduled port of call, Boston, was relegated to the sideline, dismissed. They had been forewarned, and now readily had they found themselves in this exact situation, a change of plan. Along with Jacob and Marcus, Sophie remained with the gathered teenagers. Not one of the youth wanted to be in their cabin. Without exception, their young faces were set in obvious fright. It was a subdued bunch that sat side by side along the perimeters of the long passageway. As early evening stretched into the darkness of night, with no reprieve from the battering, the girls hugged tightly to each other and whispered quietly. The boys were remarkably solemn. A few sat with head resting on bent knees, some with arms crossed in a show of defiance, or maybe bravery, and others extended their legs and held tight clasped hands on their lap, or latched onto good luck charms at their chest. But nobody sat stationary. The jostle ripped through, shoving the assembly in its entirety, side to side, forward and back. Teachers attempted passing the time by singing, by word games, but seasickness put a quick end to that effort. Once in a while, a teen told a joke, trying to lighten spirits, but the responding laughter sounded lame, forced. Retching began, and Marcus fetched 2 buckets. At times they were used, and immediately after, the contents were dumped in the head of the nearest cabin. The air was already stifling. Dr. Dorr made an appearance a couple of times, checking on the requirements for antiemetics. He also inquired as to bruises and injuries. There was one examination. The back of Colin's head had been struck on a beam. From the pouch strapped to his waist, the doctor extracted a miniature bottle of antiseptic in a bandaging roll. He worked quickly, and soon the boy sported a white crepe bandana. He was told to present for follow-up for possible stitching after the storm passed. Naturally, Sophie was observing the students' behaviors under these conditions, their reactions to stress. She knew the situation of duress and unusual pressure offered a litmus test. It would reveal deeper traits. For example, Amanda, the eldest of the girls, immediately took a leadership role. From time to time, she relocated her seating so as to rotate amongst the others and offer comfort. Encircling her arms about their shoulders, Sophie heard her utter words of reassurance. The teachers were doing likewise, receding from one location to another up and down the line. Keeping connected with each was vital. "When is this freaking thing going to be over?" one boy groaned, repeating a question that had been posed by several others already. "Who knows?" came a resigned reply. With the ship giving no hint of settling, minutes felt like hours. "How long have we been here?" asked Taylor. 7 hours, Sophie replied. "It's close to midnight." Bathroom breaks had to be taken, and earlier a rule had been agreed upon that always two went together in case of falls and possible head injury. When Captain Shasta had checked on them during the first of several visits, she insisted they follow it. Sophie liked the nappy-haired Amanda with the serious face. For someone so young, she possessed such compassion. It brought to mind her own mother, who, as far as Sophie could recall, demonstrated the same sincerity in the care of others. "And Mom had such patience, too," she remarked. "Sure needed it with the old man." Sophie appreciated her good fortune in being brought up by such a mother, and had drawn a great deal from her example. And being a mother herself seemed to evoke fierce protection for the safety of her charges. Gazing down the seated line, she gave thought to their parents, and for a fleeting moment wondered if this undertaking of school at sea had been a good idea. What if a grown Marie Claire were one of their numbers, and she, her mother, were at home wondering and worrying? Would she have permitted her to take part, to sign up in the first place? The sea, with its obstinate fits at breaking in, banging on the walls around them, and punched at the steel hull which jarred their bodies, was unrelenting. A moment before a rogue wave had sent Taylor hurling headlong from port to starboard, where he landed smack up against Louise. "Are you okay? Are you all right? Did I hurt you?" His words flew from his mouth in a stream. Her own fear and the aggravation of being beat upon were starting to grate on Sophie's nerves. She had to confess how terrified she felt. Doubts began to creep in as to pursuing deep-sea sailing. "If I'm scared here, I'll be petrified up there above, she deducted. "How can they do it, those guys? And no shelter at the wheel, even. How had the old man managed? Months on end, stretching into years. I thought his stories had to be grandly inflated, because there's one thing about him, and those who know will attest, that he's smooth as silk in spinning a yarn. But no, he's been telling the raw, ghastly truth all along." She sucked in a breath. "No exaggerations needed, and that goes for Joe, too. The week I spent on his seiner fishing salmon had exceptionally good weather and spectacular sunsets on the Pacific every evening, but he was quick to point out how that wasn't usual, especially up in the Queen Charlotte's. So he said at the time, but how would I know? He too needed no embellishment. Her foray steered her to answer her own query. "No, I would not permit my daughter. No way. Too many unknowns, too many risks, all these unpredictable factors."